fault. We're talking about Haggai and not Micah this morning. Now, Haggai is the 10th of the 12 minor prophets, and it's another one of these very short books, only 2 chapters, right at 40 verses. Now, the book is written, we know exactly, in the year 520 BC, right in the middle of the second year of the reign of the Persian king Darius I. Now, as usual, we don't know much about the prophet Haggai himself, except that he was a bona fide professional, temple-based prophet who actually gets a couple of quick shout-outs in the book of Ezra, which we looked at several months ago. Now, Haggai is very short and very focused. It comes down to 3 words: rebuild the temple. That's it. That's all he's got to say. The Babylonians had destroyed the temple in 587 BC. Then they were conquered by the Persians in 539 BC. And so now a generation later, we already know that Ezra and Nehemiah are going to do the heavy lifting when it comes to getting that temple rebuilt. But Haggai gets the call from God right there in the midst of all that, 520 BC, to come in and say, I know you're low on cash. I know you're low on morale. Do it anyway. And that's it. And then he goes his merry way. We never hear about him ever again. Now, we've gone over the significance of the temple over several times, so I'm not going to rehash that. But Haggai's book is all about the essential role that the temple plays. And so he argues that the remnant of Israel, even though they are a remnant, needs to build the temple, and they need to build it at the greatest or the highest level they possibly can do. Now, unlike most Old Testament prophets, Haggai is not 95% woe and sadness and tragedy and 5%, but we're going to find a way to make it happen. He is actually a kind of upbeat prophet, if you can imagine such a thing in the Old Testament. Now, he still wants to be clear. All the sadness, all the bad stuff, that is the result of sin, and we deserve it. But that's maybe 10% of Haggai instead of 95. And so we have here somebody who is a lot easier to read. Now, when you get to the end, the only thing that really is worth saying as a reading guide for the book of the prophet Haggai is that this cat loves King Zerubbabel. He is a big fan of King Zerubbabel. He's got nothing but good things to say, and King Zerubbabel is going to be a hit. And in fact, one of his descendants is going to be the Messiah, don't you know? And so that's kind of the big reason that Haggai gets a lot of love from Christians, because Zerubbabel, of course, is in the line of David, and the Christ, Jesus, is going to come from that same line. And so Haggai says that the hope of Israel, namely the coming of the Messiah, will be fulfilled through Zerubbabel, who is himself a kind of the Messiah. A type is the kind of formal word we use. And of course, this happens. This is the way that plays out. And of course, that's important to know, because a lot of the prophets despise most of the kings. We remember that Isaiah had one of the kings that he liked, but the rest of them were stinkers. And Zechariah despised most of the kings. But Haggai is a huge fan of Zerubbabel. And of course, it turns out Haggai got it right. And so we're very excited about that. It will not take you long to read Haggai. It's 40 verses. I mean, you could have read it 3 times by the time I had already given this very, very brief presentation. And so that really is all there is to say. We do have 2 minor prophets left. Both are relatively simple. And then, as I did mention before, we will have a whole talk that's just going to be kind of a timeline of the Old Testament. And then we will have a whole separate talk that will kind of sum up the different sections of the Old Testament and kind of get us ready for the different sections of the New Testament. There's the Gospels and the epistles and all that kind of fun stuff. And so those talks are coming up in several weeks. But that's all there is to say about the book of the prophet Haggai. It took me maybe 5 minutes. You could have read it 3 times in the time it took me to give this presentation. So now go and read the prophet Haggai with a little bit more knowledge, and think about how cool Zerubbabel is, even if you don't have any idea how to pronounce his name. I've been Father Ryan Humphries. This has been the CU Catecast. Thanks for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful afternoon.